Hi everyone, my name is David Morkunis. It's so nice to have you along as part of my LDA session today. Big thank you to Michael and everyone else from LDA for having me as part of their national conference. It's quite humbling to be included with such amazing educators and researchers, so thank you so much. I'm a classroom teacher from Bentley West Primary, so I teach year 4 currently. I've been at Bentley West for about 4.5 years. There's my Twitter handle. Please feel free to follow me on Twitter. This session is called the Daily Review Deep Dive, Tips and Tricks to Maximize the Impact of Retrieval Practice. Just to give you a bit of background as to sort of the genesis of this session. Last year I did a session for LDA as part of their weekly Wednesday webinar series. Basically like an introduction or a primer to the idea of daily reviews. And I've had a lot of feedback and a lot of chatter since that a lot of teachers would like to see how the organisational aspects of reviews work, sort of how you organise your slide decks, some examples of different topics in maths and English, and some tips and tricks for how to actually run them. So that's where the idea for this session has come out. I sort of asked people on Twitter a couple of weeks ago what they'd like to see, and I've incorporated a lot of their responses in today's session. So if you haven't already, I would highly recommend watching that initial session that I did last year. You can find it by searching my name on YouTube or just going to the LDA's YouTube channel. All right, I think it was WWW. It was 5 or 6. I think it was done back in June or July of last year. It will just mean that the ideas I'm about to present to you aren't quite as foreign. But let's go ahead and get started. All right, so before we begin, nice big pinch of salt. The stuff I'm going to show you today is really highly specialized. All right, it's the stuff that I do that works for me and my classroom at my school. All right, so it's extremely individualized. I'm by no means saying that this is best practice and that you should absolutely copy everything I do, and if you don't, you're some kind of muppet. Please feel free to take the parts that you like and introduce those into your practice and jettison the parts that you think wouldn't gel. All right, so I've interpreted the research in such a way that I try with my designs. I try and adhere to cognitive load theory and with a lot of behavioral science like spaced interleaved and retrieval practice. All right, but that's by no means saying that what I've done is the only way to do anything. All right, so just keep in mind that everything you see here, take with a pinch of salt. All right, so a brief outline before we get into the nuts and bolts. We will talk about theory briefly. It'll mostly just be a quick summary of the talk that I gave last year, just so that people who aren't already aware understand what a daily review is, okay, and why it's effective. But as I said earlier, most of this session I'd like to dedicate to the practical side of things. So I'll walk you through sort of the big picture idea behind reviews, sort of the pipeline of going from a scope and sequence to a lesson to a review. Then I'll talk to you about something I call the master review, which is essentially a central repository where all my slides stay. I'll walk you through how I use that master review to create daily reviews, and then I'm going to walk through a bunch of examples, so plenty of examples in the English and the math space of slides, and also some tips at the end for delivering a daily review. I'm like 97% sure you've got access to the slides, so everything I give you today, or all the slides that you can access, will have all of those examples in them, so feel free to steal them, put your own spin on them, and start using them. So enjoy. All right, we'll go ahead and get started with a quick theory session. So very quickly, what is a daily review? All right, so daily reviews at my school are PowerPoint presentations that are built from previously taught content. Doesn't have to be PowerPoint, but obviously all the examples I give you today will be, because that's what we use at my school. Remember, pinch of salt. But I've seen daily reviews, with closed activities, sort of open-ended quizzes, multiple choice exams, that kind of stuff as well. All right, so they're short, regular sessions. All right, so we do a daily review in maths and English at my school every day without fail. Okay, they tend to be 20 to 30 minutes each. And that's as part of sort of a 90 to 120 minute block. So you can see it takes up maybe a quarter or a third of the block itself. A wide selection of past topics in random order. So we might teach them things that we might review things that we've taught them yesterday, last week, a few weeks ago, a term or two ago, last year even. All right. And then topics are removed and brought back in regularly. So we might teach something in the review for a few days, take it out of our review deck, leave it for a few weeks, and bring it back in. All right. So these terms in brackets I'm about to explain to you. Why do these work? Well, why is a daily review, or why is using daily reviews so effective for long-term knowledge retention? So it helps facilitate transfer to long memory thanks to three things. The first thing is called spaced practice. So studying a topic in regular intervals provides greater retention than cramming. We've all been there at high school and university before an exam. You know, instead of studying, maybe it's just me, maybe I'm projecting here. Maybe you're all really sensible, studious people, and I'm just the lazy scumbag. But for me, at least, high school and university, you know, I wouldn't do anything all year and then cram in that week before the exam. And cramming will lead to strong performance on exams if that's what you're measuring. But we know that the research tells us that all that knowledge sort of evaporates very quickly after the exam. So spaced practice, studying a topic in regular intervals rather than doing huge big chunks of it, is proven to help long-term knowledge retention. So that's the first big idea, spaced practice. Then interleaved practice, so studying lots of different topics during a single study session is more effective than blocked practice, which is just studying the one topic. So in a daily review, we might touch anywhere between 8 to 12 different skills or concepts in maths and English. So it's not just like we're going to say in English, all right, we're just going to look at nouns today, or we're just going to look at, just going to look at writing simple sentences. We do a range of different things. And the last big idea is retrieval practice. So removing a topic out of a review and then bringing it back after a length of time will make memories stronger and more durable. So the idea is to, have your students start forgetting something and then reintroduce it to them. All right, that makes those memories a bit stronger. So that's the idea of retrieval practice. So daily reviews are effective thanks to those three ideas. So they promote spaced, interleaved, and we practice spaced, interleaved, and retrieval practice as part of delivering a daily review. All right, that's the theory side done. Okay, now I'm going to take you behind the curtain. I'm going to show you how the sausage is made. All right. Quickly, if you want some more information about these three ideas, I cannot recommend this book highly enough. Understanding How We Learn by Jana Weinstein and Megan Sumeracki. It's a blue book. Oliver Caviglioli did the illustrations as well. Really good. I've read it twice, and my copy is dog-eared and covered in notes and all that sort of thing. Very accessible as well. So I would highly, highly, highly recommend that book. All right. So the big picture, the pipeline, how we go from our overall scope and sequence all the way down to a daily review. So we start with a scope and sequence, and I've given you a very tiny part of the grade 4 maths scope and sequence at Bentley West. This is in fact term 1, week 1, and you'll see here that we have a lesson for ordering 5-digit numbers in ascending and descending order, and then comparing values using the greater than and less than symbol. All right, so we take that scope and sequence, which is a huge document, tells us basically every single lesson we're going to teach in maths and English for the year. And if I take this learning intention, so order 5-digit numbers in ascending and descending order, then I will take that and within our team or with me, we'll create a lesson for it. All right, so that's just the title slide of the lesson. So you can see grade 4 number in algebra, learning intention is the same as what's in our scope and sequence. Then from there, the slides and the ideas that are contained in the lesson will then form part of our daily review. All right, so here is an example of a slide where we're asking students to arrange some numbers in descending order. Okay, so we take a skill or concept from the scope and sequence, we build a lesson out of it. All right, and that's a regular, we use EDI at Bentley West. It's an I do, we do, you do sort of lesson with independent practice and all that other fun stuff. And from there, that will then form part of our daily review. So I might teach this lesson on a Monday, and then I'll have some review slides for it that I might give my students for the next few days. Then I might take them out and put them back in after a week or so. That's essentially how it works. That's the pipeline. So from the scope and sequence, we then create a lesson, and the slides that we use in our lesson, we then take out and use as our review. All right. And so the key difference here, of course, is that lesson might be 40, 45 minutes. All right, but covering it in a daily review shouldn't be more than 2 or 3. All right, because again, we want to use interleaved practice. We don't just want to do ascending and descending order for 20 or 30 minutes in a maths review. We want to weave different topics in. So the key difference here is that this will be much shorter. Delivering this part of a daily review will be much shorter than the lesson itself. So that's the big picture idea with the reviews. All right, so I use something called I call it the master review, and it's essentially a repository for every slide I've made for review purposes. All right, so they're huge, absolute monsters of files. It's like 2,000 slides in my maths review at this point. The reason I do that is I work hard, but I'm also very lazy. All right, I don't want to have to redo work. So once I've created a set of slides for something, I don't want to have to redo those ever again. So I keep them in the same place or in one central location so I can find them easily. So if we say in a few weeks, the students aren't really understanding prime and composite numbers, maybe we should review that a couple more times. I can grab those slides more easily without having to basically reinvent the wheel and do new slides every time. If you were to create new slides every time you did a review, you'd burn out within a month, I'd say. You have to be smart with this stuff. So it's a repository with every single slide in it, and I have it organized by skill or concept, because if you don't, it becomes unwieldy. Remember, again, grain of salt, all this is PowerPoint specific. If you're doing daily reviews in different ways, then you can disregard all of this. So here's an example. Here's a screenshot of my master review for maths. This is not all of it. This is only a very small section of it, but you can see here that I have sections. PowerPoint allows you to do that. So I've got a section for mental maths. I've got each of the 4 operations and then some other stuff here as well. This is mostly place value stuff. And similarly for English, we're starting to use the writing revolution quite heavily in our work. So that's what TWR stands for here. And so I've got some sub-skills that I've broken into sections. And you might be thinking, well, how on earth have you got 13 slides for that one thing? A key part of daily reviews in maths and English is to make sure that even if you're doing the same skill or concept for a few days in a row, the actual questions that your students are being exposed to need to be different. Especially in, actually no, I shouldn't say especially, it's equally important in both maths and English. Because if you give, let's say you're doing a subtraction block, I suppose, and you're putting subtraction in your daily review 5 days in a row, and you're giving them the same question every day for 5 days, your more capable students will likely start memorizing the answers and won't bother doing the work. Right? It's the same with English. If you've got the same closed questions, for example, then the students will know the answers by the time they've done it the second or third time, which sort of defeats the purpose of it. So I'll go into more detail about what that looks like a bit later on. So yeah, I've organized everything by skill or concept, and essentially I use the master review and then pull the slides I need for the day out from them, and they become the daily reviews. So it's almost like, I'll give you an analogy, anyone who's using their sourdough, that sort of thing, the master review is like the mother, all right, and then you take a bit out to put in the oven, that's the daily review. I don't know if that analogy works at all. All right, so that's a quick screenshot, all right, of a very small amount of slides that I've done for our maths review. Okay, just what it looks like. So this is the slide sorter the slide sorter view in PowerPoint, which is really, really good. Really good. I would highly recommend using it to keep everything organized. You can find it in the view tab up the top. And so yeah, these are a bunch of flashcards, this first bit up here, and then down here are the first few sections of my multiplication facts slides. So yeah, I use this to essentially crimp and grab slides out in order to create daily reviews. So I'll go into more detail about that now. All right, so when you're creating a daily review, you have to decide on what skills or concepts you want to include, obviously. It needs to be a mixture. All right, in the beginning of the year, it'll probably just be the stuff that you've taught that week or in the previous couple of weeks. But as the year progresses, you'll obviously bring in stuff that you taught a long time ago. So the schedule that we use, and again, grain of salt, the schedule that we use is if we teach something, let's call it day one, right? We teach something on day one. We put it in review on day 2, 3, 4, and 5. So the next 4 consecutive school days. Then we take it out and we put it back in after 3 weeks. Then we take it out again and put it back in. We take it out for 3 weeks. We put it back once. All right. Then we take it out and put it back after 6 weeks. Then we take it out and put it back after 9 weeks. Okay. There are some things we leave in every day, and I'll get into more detail about that later with English and maths examples. But generally, if we've taught something in a lesson like that ascending order thing, ascending order lesson, so teach it on day 1, put it in review day 2, 3, 4, 5, then take it out, put it back in after 3 weeks. Do you need to do that? No, absolutely not. And in fact, the research suggests that there's not actually a Goldilocks zone of a perfect gap. You just have to play it by ear. You're welcome to do what we do, but if you have a different system that works or a different schedule that works, do that. It's one of the least important parts, to be perfectly honest. As long as you're actually taking things out and putting them back in, then your students will get the benefit of that retrieval practice. So don't be thinking that I'm so prescriptive that I'm telling you, you have to do it this way. Okay? So you need to decide on which skills and concepts to include. Now, at the beginning of the year, that's quite easy because you've only taught a few things to your students, but very quickly, it'll start to become unwieldy. So you need some sort of a schedule. All right. Now, in my first talk I gave you last year, I gave to LDA last year, I included a screenshot of this insane Excel spreadsheet that a relative of one of our teachers whipped up for us. I use that, and a few other teachers at the school use that, but it's overkill. It's really intense stuff. So don't be thinking you need to become some kind of Excel or PowerPoint wizard in order to use a schedule. Just write it down somewhere. Yeah, even if you're just writing it down in a Word document, okay? Or you're filling in a calendar where you filled in, all right, this is the day I've taught something. These are the days I should review it. Okay, but it's helpful to create a schedule. Don't be thinking that you can just keep it up here because you'll forget topics after a while, and then all of a sudden you come to term 4 and think, oh my goodness, we haven't covered this since term 1. I better put it in review, and then you run the risk. Obviously, if the gap's too long, you run the risk of your students actually forgetting completely what that skill or concept is, which we don't want. We want them to start forgetting, but we don't want them to forget completely. Otherwise, you would need to reteach them. So copy slides from your master review to build daily reviews. Now, I've gotten to the point where what I do is I actually just copy the whole file itself into my daily review folder, and then I go in and I delete everything I don't need. That's how I do it, but you could just as easily just click and drag slides into a new file. That would work as well. And here, hiding and unhiding slides is extremely useful. I wouldn't be able to do this stuff without it, all right? If you're not sure how to do that, you just need to select a slide, either in the normal view or in the slide sort of view. Right-click and either press H or scroll down to where it says hide. And then when you or your colleagues go through a presentation, any slides that are hidden won't actually show up. So you can just skip through. So some people do it that way as well. They actually just use their master review every day and just hide and unhide slides as they like. So a few different ways for you to do that if you want. Now, there are 2 schools of thought at my school. Yeah, that's a useful sentence. There are sort of 2 ideas about how you should organize the reviews yourself. Look, this is really inside baseball, so it doesn't really matter too much. I'll cover this just quickly, though. Some teams at my school use one file for the entire week. They'll be like, all right, here's your maths reviews for the whole week. Some teams like mine, we just use one file per day. I am in charge of making the reviews for my entire team of 4. So there's 4 teachers in grade 4. I just try and consider ease of use for them. So I don't want them to have to ask me questions about, hey, what topics are we covering? What do I need to do with this review? I just wanted it to get to the point where all they have to do is click the file, start the slideshow, and off they go. So for that, I reckon individual files per day are better. Because they can just open them and go straight ahead. But I have seen success with other teams who basically have like, oh, here's your Monday section, your Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. They often have like heading slides or cover slides, and they work that way. Again, probably doesn't really matter, but just pick one of those and stick to it, I guess. All right. So something I do as well, this again is that slide sorter view where you can see an overall picture of all of your slides. You might notice these boxes in the top right hand corner. This is just a section about adding fractions. So I do these as a visual cue for me. It's not for the students or even for the other teachers in the year level. It's just purely for me. This was what I was saying before, right? So this white slide here is, if you remember my talk last year, would be like the recite or recall slide, okay, where we're going to go through and talk about how we add fractions that have the same denominator. This E means you can put it in every day. You wouldn't normally, but you can put it in sort of whenever. It doesn't really matter which day you put it in. And then I have this M, T, W, T, H, and F, which you probably have guessed, the days of the week. So Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. It's so that I don't accidentally put the same slide in for 2 or 3 reviews in a row. Because if I did that, as I said before, students would start memorizing answers. So I've used that as a system, just so I think to myself, well, all right, I want to do adding fractions with the same denominator. The review will be, I want to do it on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. I will pull out Wednesday's slide for Wednesday's review, Thursday's slide for Thursday's review, and Friday's slide for Friday's review. That's sort of a foolproof way to make sure I'm not accidentally doubling up, if that makes sense. Here's a different way of doing it as well. I started doing this last year. This is a section in our English review about it's a writing revolution subskill. It's converting notes into a paragraph to describe a setting. So here again, we've got our recite or recall apply, which is the white slide. And then these are all the apply slides, the tan colored ones. The language that we've got, and this is thanks to Michael McKinnon, whose session you just saw. The visual language we sort of have is that white slides are when you speak with the teacher, you read with the teacher, and tan colored slides, you work on your whiteboards independently. So I would put these 2 here that have the 1 in them. I would put these in the first time that we're reviewing this, and then from there 2, then 3, then 4, to again avoid giving the students the exact same example 2 days in a row. All right, so that kind of stuff really helps. The reason I've got it sort of by color and that sort of thing is when I zoom out massively to that master review view where you can see like 200 slides on a screen, I can see really quickly without having to read the slides themselves. I can see really quickly which slide I need and grab it that way. It's just a way to save time when you're creating these. When I first created daily reviews, they would take me hours every day. Now I'm down to the point where they only take a few minutes, and that's sort of thanks to the fact that my slide decks are pretty well full at this point. But also stuff like this. There's a few little tips and tricks you can use to just make that process of creating your reviews a bit easier. And those of you who saw my talk last year will remember as well, that was my only job in the team last year, or the last couple of years, just to create these. All right, so just keep in mind, it is a lot of work. All right, so I'm just going to go through some example slides for you now. This was really heavily requested when I asked on Twitter, so I'm going to go through a bunch of English slides with you and a bunch of math slides as well. And then we'll wrap up with just some general tips about how to implement these. If all this is sounding pretty full on, I do believe you have access to the recordings after the fact, so please feel free to watch this again. But always reach out on Twitter and ask me questions. I'm always happy to help. All right, so here's a vocab slide. And we will generally do a couple of these every day in English. Now, generally we'll sort of use tier 2 words, so the words that students see in their books and literature that they don't necessarily use in everyday speech. So I think this word came from one of our novel studies. So nonchalant. So we'd start by saying the word together, nonchalant. We'd break it into its syllables. And I'm always really nervous showing this because I'm really bad at syllable division. I hope that's right. I'm sure it's 3, but I hope I've split them in the correct answer, in the correct way. Sorry. So students would put their fingers on their chin. We'd say it together, nonchalant, and we talk about its part of speech. So I'd say, it's an adjective. What part of speech is it? They would all say adjective. Here's a kid-friendly definition. It means not fussed or worried. So I'd say to my students, what does nonchalant mean? And they would say not fussed or worried. And then I would turn it around and say, well, if I'm not fussed or worried, I would be. And they would all say nonchalant. Then we have some synonyms and antonyms we would go through, and then a picture and a sentence. All right, so the nonchalant turtle didn't have a care in the world. Nothing could faze it. So from that point, we would then have students use that word in a sentence. All right. So again, your mileage may vary. Remember that I teach grade 4, so they're, the majority of them are fairly comfortable with being able to write a full sentence. I should mention as well, of course, this is mostly covered in the session I did last year, but differentiation within the slides is really important, but also when you're delivering a review. Okay, so if you've got students that still don't understand nonchalant, you would work with them while the rest of your class wrote a sentence. So no more than sort of a minute or so on this slide. And you can have a bit of fun with it. So here's another example, the word askew, all right? Again, the syllable and the part of speech and the meaning not straight or off center. And normally by this point, my students are asking me what's going on. And then of course, my copy of the Mona Lisa is slightly askew. So feel free to have a bit of fun with it as well. And so again, they would then write a sentence using askew on their whiteboards. And if they're clever, they would write the sentence askew. Okay, so a couple of vocab examples for you. Here is a comprehension piece. We try and do one of these every day as well. Generally non-fiction, but they can be some narrative fiction and that sort of thing too. So this is a comprehension piece about St. Patrick's Day. All right, so a small piece that we would read together. So I might read it to them while I have them track, or we might do some choral reading or some echo reading. We've found that their comprehension tends to improve if we print these out ahead of time so that each student has their own handout to follow along from rather than having to look at the screen. So once we do that, we have a literal question to which the answer is found on the lines. All right, St. Patrick lived during which century? And here is an example of differentiation, I guess. In grade 4, we expect our students to answer these sentences to answer these questions in full sentences. All right, so I would not allow an answer of 5th century. It would need to be St. Patrick lived during the 5th century. But for students who aren't sure, what we normally do is we give them the question, and then after a few moments, give them a clue. All right, so I would say reread the bit that I've just highlighted. And the answer's right after that. Okay, and then again, kids would chin their answers, go through correct any misconceptions, and move on. But remember, quick pace. Then an inferential question, right? So the answer to an inferential question is found between the lines. Why is St. Patrick's Day celebrated outside Ireland? So, bit of a trickier one. Again, needs to be a full sentence answer. And I'm quick to remind my students, look, with an inferential question, there's not necessarily one correct answer. Okay, it could be several. And again, another clue. All right, and then at the end, if you want an evaluative question as well. So have you ever celebrated St. Patrick's Day? What did you do? Generally for this one, if I skip it quite often, right, because I find the inferential and literal questions a bit more valuable. But if I'm going to do it, this is perhaps less about whiteboards and more a chance for them to do some pair shares. And then you can pick some pop sticks and sort of ask for some answers there. All right. So here's an example of a writing revolution series that I've done. It's certainly not perfect. There's a few changes I need to make to this. This is about fragments and sentences. So this what I just showed you, the vocab and comprehension pieces, we would generally put one of those in every day. This is more of an example of something that follows the schedule I told you before. So we sort of teach it on day 1, put it in for the next few days, and then take it out. All right. So this white slide again would mean that we chat along with the students would chat along with their teacher. So we might read this together. A fragment is a group of words that is on a complete sentence. It usually lacks a subject, who, a verb, what, or both. And so a sentence, and then a definition of a sentence. Okay, and then some examples. So let's read this out loud. Do this with the class. The dog barked. This is a sentence. It has a subject, and notice that the subject is circled and here and in the sentence. It has a verb, and it makes sense. All right, and then an example of a fragment. The terrified cat. It has a subject, but it does not have a verb. All right, so we would do this. This is like our recite slide, just to refresh students of the concept here about fragments and sentences, and then a chance for them to apply their own knowledge. Hence the color change in the slide. All right, notice that we've included up here the information we've just read. That's in case they forget. All right, they can refer back to this if they need to. As I said, these slides are sort of always in flux. Visually, this is a bit busy, so I might make some changes to it. And the activity is, are these passages fragments or sentences? Write F or S on your whiteboard. So they're going to write A, B, C, D down the left-hand side, and then they'll read each one of these, and if they think it's a fragment, an F. If they think it's a sentence, an S. Nice and quick, should take 20 or 30 seconds. they chin their answers, you can scan and check very quickly to see whether they're correct. Also, something I discussed last year, you don't wait for every student to do every question, all right? You put enough in that everyone's on task for the whole time, but once people start finishing and once your students that have a slightly lower ability have done one or two, move on, all right? Quick pace is essential. You could quite easily turn an English review into a 2-hour affair, but your students will be losing their minds. And here as well, a little extension thing. For any fragments, write down what's missing. Okay, so go through the answers with them. A is a sentence, and again, if you want to stop and perhaps challenge a couple of kids with pop sticks and say, "Oh, why is it a sentence?" You would hope that they say, "Well, it's got a subject and a verb, and it makes sense." And then we've got a fragment that's missing a verb, a sentence, and then a fragment that is also missing a verb. All right, so that's an example of some of the stuff we're using with the Writing Revolution. And here's another one. So this activity is to identify positives in sentences. Again, same kind of deal, sort of a recite or recall slide and then an apply slide. So to identify positives in sentences, I'm not going to go through this in as much detail, all right, but you can feel free to play around with the slides in your own time. So we'll go through the process of how to identify a positive in a sentence, and then it's their chance to do it themselves. So write the positive in each sentence on your whiteboard. So again, we've got 2 questions, so at least you would hope that every student can answer at least the first one, and then we go through the answers. And I'm revealing myself as a prog rock nerd because I had to put a King Crimson example in there. All right, here are some maths examples. Some of these I've talked about in other conferences, but not generally ones that people have had the slides for. So every day we'll pick a set of multiplication facts to do. So this is the recite stage, so we just recite them forwards and backwards. So 1 3 is 3, 2 3 is 6, 3 3 is 9. Everyone does that forwards and backwards. We'll throw out some random facts for them. All right, 6 3s, the class will say 18, 4 3s, 12, 10 3s, 30. And then you can play around with some powers of 10 as well. So you might say, all right, what are 5 3s? 15. What are 50 3s? 150. What are 50 30s? 1,500, that sort of thing. So once we do that, we move into an apply slide. All right, so my students are expected to answer the 10 questions above the line first, and as we said with differentiation, some more challenging questions down the bottom for them. All right, so you give them a minute or so, then we go through the answers together. Okay, from there we move into some skip counting. All right, again by 3s, so we're using the same fact family, the same set of multiplication facts all the way through. So we skip counting backwards by 3, starting from 45. So we would do this out loud, 39, 36, 33, 30, etc. And then after that, our fact family slides. We don't do these every day. I've only put one of these in. I have shared these on Twitter before. If you go to my page, the pinned tweet has all of these for you ready to go all the way from 0 to 10. But we would say for here, 2 3s are 6, 3 2s are 6, 6 divided by 3 is 2, 6 divided by 2 is 3. Sort of at a good pace. And we go through all 10 of them. And then a sabotaging slide. All right, so you give them 15 to 20 seconds on that. And again, you just want your entire grade to answer that first one, and then anyone who answers, the questions below the lines, consider it a bonus. Okay, clean the answers, go through them like that. So we'll do those every day in a maths review. Now here's an example again of something that we will teach them, put in the review, and then sort of take out. All right. So this is vertical addition with renaming. All right, so the white slide. So we're basically going to go through the algorithm with them. This comes from Stephen Norton and George Booker. So talking marks in the blue sort of indicates to them that they need to say it with you. So 6 1s, add 6 1s equals 12 1s. Rename as 1 10 2 1s. It shows them how to record it. I'm just going to go through the rest of the question just to get to the examples for you. And then once we've got through that, questions for them. All right, and this is, I find maths a lot easier to differentiate, so this is when you can really push your high ones. So a couple of questions that just have 2 add-ins, then, well, let's put a question with 3 add-ins in, let's put a question with decimals in there. So again, have them working for a minute, chin the answers, and move on. You'll notice that daily reviews are a really, really good way of getting some formative assessment done with your kids. All right, if they're constantly flunking this, then you might need to have a conversation with your team and say, hey, my kids are absolutely flubbing vertical addition with renaming. Do we keep reviewing it, or do we potentially actually reteach it? Okay, because you do need to do that sometimes. Here's another example. So this is some place value. So we'll likely be doing this probably in the first couple of weeks of term 1. Look at the blue digit, it has a value of 80, so we say 80. So we just go through them and we'd say 80 in as class, 900, 70, 1, 300. Some more examples for you, some prime factorization. I love myself some factor trees. Don't you all love factor trees? So think of a factor pair, put these two numbers below. Again, I'm not going to spend tons of time on this. You've got these slides, so you can feel free to dissect them in your own time. It's just to show you that, you know, we sort of break down the process. This has probably come directly from the lesson that we've taught them about it, and then give them a chance to apply it. So 3 numbers that they then need to do factor trees for themselves. All right. Here's some angles. So again, these are just flashcards. So you throw that up and they'll say right angle, right, obtuse, etc. And apply. All right, so, you know, measuring angles with protractors. So they would need to write 50 degrees on their whiteboards. So a few of those as well. So all of these are included in your slides. And here's some problem solving. So when this is a SBM means Singapore bar model, right? Where that's again another big push at our school to sort of create some more sophisticated problem solving strategies for our students. So again, walk through an example. We tell them exactly how to draw it with the bars, all right, including the algorithm and everything. And then, like everything, they apply it themselves. So this is exactly the same concept as the previous example. The only difference is the numbers and the words in the bars, I guess. And then, of course, you're hoping that all the students do that on their whiteboards. All right, so we're getting close to the end. I want to talk to you for a couple of minutes about how you would actually deliver your daily reviews. And then we may have time for a few questions in the chat. Don't forget, this is pre-recorded, so it's likely that I'm in the chat with you now, feverishly typing away. So to deliver a successful daily review, quick pace is crucial, absolutely crucial, okay? Time can very quickly get away from you doing these. And for us, we do our maths and English reviews at the beginning of our blocks. So if we go over time, we're actually robbing our students of lesson time for whatever new skill or concept we want to teach them. That being said, though, obviously the pace will improve with time. So don't be too harsh on yourself the first time you do a review. I think the first time I did a maths review, it ended up being over an hour long. Right, so it's only with practice and with a bit of coaching from some of our more senior teachers that I was able to get the time down. Routines and norms will help you enormously, and I'll give you a couple of things at the bottom of this slide that should help with that. After a couple of weeks, your students will understand what is expected of them within a review. They'll know that, all right, when you say, all right, it's time for our maths review, it's time for our English review, they need their whiteboards. They should have a cleared table. They should be ready to speak. They should be ready to write. You know, we use sort of a listening mode and a writing mode. You know, so as I said, the white slides, nothing in your hands, get ready to channel on with the teacher. The tan-colored slides, ready to write. Okay, so those kind of norms and routines will really help with getting your pace up there as well. And don't forget, the idea is not for every student to complete every question. If you're going to do that, your reviews could last for hours and hours. Yeah, your speed will improve over time. So support those students who need it, okay? You can see there should be a wide breadth of questions in your apply slides for the students to solve, all right? Going from the less challenging to the more challenging. But of course, use that time while your students are working independently, even though it's only normally for a minute or two. Use that time to support those students who need a bit of extra help. You know, read things out to the students who have reading difficulties. All that fun stuff, and build in extension questions or harder content for the students who need that as well. All right, so it goes both ways. One of the teachers at my school always talks about maximizing time on task. So you want all the students engaged as often as possible. If the questions are too hard, then your students who struggle with them won't even engage. All right, so they won't be on task. But if they're too easy, then your more capable students will fly through everything, and they'll be stuck twiddling their thumbs. And as we know as teachers, that's often when you get behavioral problems and stuff like that as well. So you want to try and maximize time on task. Here's a couple of icons that I've created. I haven't actually used these yet, so your mileage might vary. A huge pinch of salt, as I said. I'm going to start putting these on my slides just as indicators for my students. This is sort of an alternative to using the white and tan colored slides. So I might stick this up sort of the top right hand corner of a slide. And if they see that, they will know that means, all right, it's time to do something on your whiteboards. And of course, this might actually be more for the teachers, perhaps, rather than the students. But whenever they see this icon, they'll know that we're going to choose pop sticks. So it's a good precursor for students to start thinking about answers. So you might want to use those kind of visual clues. They can help with building routines and that sort of thing as well. So feel free to use those. Let me know how you go, because I haven't started using them yet. All right, well, that's it. That's the end of my part. So thank you so much for tuning in. If you're watching this as part of the LDA National Conference on the day, then I believe my session's last, which means you must be absolutely exhausted. So well done for getting through. Thanks so much for tuning in. And yeah, we'll see you next time.